everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the Stigma Crusher here. This is Mental Health Week here in Canada and I believe in all of North America. The first week in May is Mental Health Week, which is dedicated to opening up the conversations around mental health and mental illness. And really getting people to be aware of their own experience of mental health, which obviously 5 in 5 of us have mental health, as well as the experiences of living with mental illness, which about 1 in 5 of us have at any given time, but half of us will have struggled with by the time we reach the age of 40. And the theme of this year's Mental Health Week in Canada is Unmasking Mental Health. I will link in the description box below an article that I wrote for the Catalyst magazine of the Mental Health Commission of Canada about unmasking. And really where I interpreted this, I think there are really 2 ways to interpret the theme of unmasking. One of them is unmasking all of those stigmas, all of those prejudices, all of that discrimination around mental illness, and really getting people to understand the experience of living with mental illness. But the other one, and the one I wrote about mostly for the Mental Health Commission, is unmasking in one's daily life. So I've spoken on this channel before about how especially when I'm symptomatic with my bipolar disorder, I wear a mask out my front door every single day. Often it is very literal as well as figurative. And so like today, I went into the office and I'm wearing a full face of makeup, foundation, blush, eyeshadow, mascara, the whole 9 yards. And I put this on carefully to make myself look professional, to make myself look put together, to make myself look like I'm coping. Even when I'm not, even when I'm feeling the most vulnerable, I put on this mask of makeup. But I also go out my door with a mask on, with trying to communicate to other people through facial expressions, through my body language, through the words that I use, that I'm okay even when I'm not okay. Now, I live a radically open and outside of the closet experience of mental illness. I talk here on this channel about my experience of bipolar disorder. I speak at work and within the government of Canada about my experiences with bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, etc., etc. And so I have more difficulty than most staying in the mental illness closet. Anyone that's seen my talks, seen my channel, or even Googled me on the internet will know that I live with mental illness. But I still have the option of presenting myself as doing all right, even when I'm not. And that's the mask that I wear. And I've spoken on this channel before as well about potentially the benefits of taking off that mask. And so when people who I'm close to, for example, colleagues, my work wife or work husband, for example, my closest colleagues at work, ask me how I'm doing, I would like to be able to tell them, I'm struggling, I'm having a rough time. Can you help? Can we chat? Can we have a coffee break? Is there any way that you could re-explain this to me? I was having trouble cognitively grasping it because cognitive side effects are part of my disorder. I would like to be able to be honest. I'd like to be able to be honest with my boss and say, yeah, I'm struggling right now. I need an accommodation. And so I've worked very hard to get to the point where I can choose to unmask, but it's still a choice. It's like coming out as lesbian. I have the option of letting people know that I'm a lesbian woman or not, and letting them think whatever it is that they're going to think, which generally is to default to that my partner is a man and I have a husband. So it's this process of coming out of the mental illness closet. This is the unmasking. And it's a privilege and a curse. So the privilege part is that I get to choose whether and how I let people know about my mental illness. I get to choose the narrative that I spin around that mental illness, because you can't see it on my face or my body unless I'm in the throes of a depressive episode and I'm moving more slowly, then people start to wonder. But they don't immediately jump to mental illness. I get to control that narrative to a certain extent. That's the blessing part. The curse part is that I'm constantly having to make that decision, constantly having to decide that is this the moment when I should be honest, unmask, let someone know that I'm struggling with my mental health and my mental illness. And that can be a difficult decision to make, especially when I'm feeling unwell, when I'm feeling my most vulnerable. My tendency is to want to put on that brave face, keep that mask up, and just, keep going, putting one foot in front of the other. But it can be very freeing to a certain extent to unmask, especially to those that are close to me, to those that I feel comfortable and safe with, to unmask and to be honest. Now, it's not always suitable for everyone to unmask, and it's not wrong. It's not awful. It's not horrible. It's not even necessarily inauthentic to walk around with the mask on. It's self-protective. I spoke in my article, you'll see, I spoke to some friends and colleagues of mine who live with neurodivergence as well as mental illness, and they find that masking is so natural, it's so second nature that it's actually easier than unmasking. And it's a social lubricant. It makes sure that those relationships, especially in the workplace, but also social relationships, keep moving in, like a well-oiled machine. Because coming out and telling someone that you're neurodivergent or that you're living with mental illness, it can make the other person not know what to do, not know what to say. It can make them uncomfortable. And that can also make it more difficult for you as the person living with that neurodivergence or mental illness to keep the conversation going, especially when you're feeling your most vulnerable. And so masking isn't wrong. But for me, in my radical outness, as it were, it feels to me, in my experience, to be inauthentic to my own self. Because I call myself the stigma crusher. And yet, when I'm masking, it feels to me like I'm retreating into my own self-stigma. I mask, and I have always masked, because of that self-stigma. Because of the stigma I know exists in my society, sure, but largely because I myself feel like I'm a failure when I'm living with mental illness, when I'm living symptomatically. And I don't want other people to see that I'm such a failure. And so being able to unmask and come out, it's that thought experiment that you do in cognitive behavioral therapy, where you take the risk, you do the scary thing, and you see what comes of it. And each and every time that I have unmasked in front of colleagues, for example, there has been from time to time a little bit of like, I don't know what to do with this, but it's always been for me, thankfully, a positive experience. I haven't had the experience of being discriminated against as a result of my unmasking. Now, is that to say it doesn't happen? Absolutely not. I know certainly of cases where someone has unmasked and then at the workplace they haven't been given the meaty files, the difficult work, the meaty, the interesting, the difficult work, because sometimes out of pure consideration, misguided consideration for that person, they don't want to stress them out, they don't want to make things more difficult for them because they're struggling with their mental health, and so the boss doesn't give those difficult files. But there's also the stigma of is that person going to crack? Are they going to leave me high and dry? And so that's another reason why it's beneficial to not give someone who says they're struggling with mental illness the difficult, the meaty, the stressful files. And those are the ones that allow you to advance. Those are the ones that allow you to develop. And so it can turn into a very stigmatizing situation. Now, I'm fortunate that I haven't had that experience. And so I continue to put myself out there and unmask regularly with colleagues and superiors. But it's not always the right thing to do. How do you know whether it's a safe and right thing for you to do? You can listen to the way that people talk about mental health and mental illness in the workplace or in your social situations. Are they using highly stigmatizing language? Are they saying people are psycho and one flew over the cuckoo's nest and a few bricks short of a full load? Are they using stigmatizing language like saying, oh yeah, I like to keep my desk neat, I'm so OCD? Or, this political situation is like that politician is so bipolar, they just don't know what they want. Are they using language in that way? If so, it may be that they are laboring under and living under the thumb of stigma, mental health stigma. When you talk about violence and, gun violence or mass murder, are people immediately jumping to the idea that the person must have had mental illness in order to be that violent. Those things can give you the indication that perhaps this person is not going to be the easiest or the safest for you to unmask in front of. You may also want to consider, the situation that you're in. Are you competing for a job, for example? Maybe it's not the right time to unmask. Are you, I can think of a variety of situations where I would probably choose to remain behind the mask. Maybe in a new workplace where you're an unknown quantity. You may want to remain behind that mask for a little while. And as I say, it's not wrong to be masked. I think the theme of Mental Health Week is unmasking because it's only through unmasking, through what we call contact, that the stigma is going to get any better. Now, contact is when you meet someone with mental illness and you get to know them. And you get to know that they have mental illness and you think, oh wow, this person doesn't fit all the stereotypes I had, doesn't fit the stigma that I held. They're not violent, they're not stupid, they're not lazy, they're not just sucks on the system, they're not, all of those horrible things that we think of people with mental illness. They're a regular person. They are a mother, they are a wife, they are a worker, they're a good worker. And in that way, a person gets to challenge the stigma that they hold about mental illness. That's the best way. Now, we can do education, we can do awareness campaigns, we can do legislation that prohibits discrimination against people with mental illness and accommodations in the workplace, for example. Those things are good, they help, but the single best way to change attitudes and therefore to change stigma is through this interpersonal contact that you have with people with mental illness. And the only way you can get that interpersonal contact is if a person is willing to unmask, to come out of their mental health closet and tell you that they are struggling with mental illness. And so I think that's why unmasking is such an important topic, that it's become the theme of this Mental Health Week. And so that is why I continue to try to live radically out in the open and radically unmasked. But again, not always the safest, not always the best. It's a privilege and a curse, but you can choose when to unmask. Take care of yourselves, enjoy your Mental Health Week, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.
Stigma Crusher.